very much. Coming up on 10 minutes after the noon hour, Milwaukee Police Chief Ed Flynn has just taken the podium downtown. He'll be talking about...
Earlier today, I was
well, we'll let Chief Flynn tell you.
By the acting United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Wisconsin, and I was also provided with a copy of a correspondence signed by the acting United States Attorney, Greg Honstad, and Paige Fitzgerald, acting chief of the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division. It was addressed to me, and it advised me that after a review by the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, evaluating the allegations of civil rights violations against former Officer Christopher Manny, that they completed their review and they have determined that a criminal prosecution is not warranted and that the criminal investigation is closed. Subsequently, I have decided to do the following. I have conveyed a request to the acting United States Attorney and the Director of the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services requesting a collaborative reform agreement with the Justice Department and the Milwaukee Police Department. Now, I do this in recognition of the inevitable fact that there are many in this community that still question this department's commitment to reform as well as its commitment to transparency. Just yesterday, this department achieved accreditation from the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Accreditation Group, demonstrating that we had met their standards on 226 areas of concern, and were able to demonstrate that our policies met current state of practice policies and that we could verify we in fact adhere to our policies. Over the last several years, we have evaluated consent decrees in numerous major city police departments and applied them to a self-examination of our practices, our policies, and our trainings, and consciously adjusted all of those to meet those issues that have been raised in other jurisdictions. We have been committed to reform here for 8 years. We have accomplished much. We have presided over decreases in crime, while at the same time presiding over dramatic decreases in the use of force, dramatic decreases in the number of citizen complaints lodged against this agency, dramatic decreases in the number of people injured by the police in either uses of force or in our pursuits for nonviolent offenses. We're committed to reform. We remain committed to reform. Asking for a collaborative agreement is a commitment on my part to both continue reform, but also to demonstrate that I am absolutely convinced that external review of our operations, our policies, our procedures, and our practices will verify the progress we make and the fact that we are an agency committed to reform. Having said that, we are certainly open to those suggestions that may arise from an evaluation of our efforts heretofore. Now, let me make a couple of things very clear, because I suspect there'll be some speculation on this. Collaborative reform does not inoculate a police department against a pattern and practice lawsuit. Let me repeat that. Collaborative reform does not inoculate a police department from a pattern and practice lawsuit. In point of fact, the Justice Department will not countenance a collaborative reform agreement in a department that is already going to be subject to a pattern and practice finding. Collaborative reform is only granted to those agencies that have already demonstrated progress, have already demonstrated commitment to reform, and are open to external review and evaluation. And that's our goal. The fact that we've achieved accreditation by a law enforcement group, the fact that the Fire and Police Commission has commissioned studies on our uses of force and citizen complaints, the fact that they commissioned a citizen survey into the approval of this agency does not negate the fact that for some folks in this community, these are all agencies that have a connection to this police department. I think we can say with confidence that this Justice Department has never been a knee-jerk supporter of police misconduct, and certainly has a strong track record of suing police departments they in fact believe are engaged in pattern and practice violations. I'm convinced we can withstand any such scrutiny and will not be subject to such a finding, and that in fact the granting of collaborative reform will at least show that we have cleared that initial hurdle. So I'm eager to engage with external review. I again convey my condolences to the Hamilton family. There is no replacing their loss, and I have every understanding for their grief and anger at the findings of several competent law enforcement jurisdictions that there was not a criminal violation, even though this department held the former officer accountable for policy violations. Having said that, I will welcome your questions.
Chief, could you explain the idea of collaborative reform, what it entails, and how it will affect this department?
Well, what collaborative reform entails is you reach out to the Justice Department and you say, all right, we think we're doing things the right way and are moving in the right direction. We also recognize we could probably improve, and we also recognize that there are some citizens concerned about our state of practice. Come in and evaluate what we're doing. The departments they have generally selected for this are departments who already had reformers at the helm and were already moving in a positive direction. And what they come in, they evaluate the track you're on, they compare your practices to what they believe is the state of best professional practice, they evaluate your policies, and they evaluate your trainings. And they make a series of recommendations. For example, they recently published some very strong recommendations for the St. Louis County Police Department in the wake of their handling of the disturbances in Ferguson, Missouri. They did a very strong evaluation of Philadelphia, which was already undergoing reforms at the time, but they carefully examined their use of deadly force and made some recommendations for changes in their policy that have produced some positive outcomes. As I say, I'm convinced we can clearly demonstrate we're on the right track and that we have paid careful attention to their rulings in other jurisdictions. But again, I want to clearly demonstrate to this community we are not afraid of external evaluation. If that external evaluation says there are things we should be doing differently or better, we'll embrace them.
Do requests like this always get accepted?
No, to my knowledge. I think what happens, it's been my understanding, that applications are accepted from departments that they have determined have already undertaken a path towards reform, not police departments that are considered out of control, problematic, and beyond the pale of collaborative reform, but in fact need a consent decree. And departments that need consent decrees, the consent decree requires conformance and places the city in the position of spending a great deal of money to verify that conformance. Collaborative review is seen as genuinely a collaboration between willing partners committed to positive police practice and strong community relations.
Chief Greg Moore, Associated Press. I know you guys have community partners, and I wonder if you've heard from any of those community partners about the temperature in their neighborhoods since the announcement.
I think you're going to see that there is a variety of reactions depending on where people already were. I think, at the neighborhood level, the grassroots level, this department is working closely and collaboratively with a wide variety of community groups that are more concerned about the extreme levels of violence in their neighborhoods and the fact that they're relying on us for both protection as well as prevention. I also think we have segments of this community that are very organized around this particular issue and are extrapolating from this tragedy that this police department somehow is routinely or cavalierly engaging in acts of misconduct. Nothing could be further from the truth, but there are folks that apparently believe that. And it's my contention that A, that's inaccurate, and B, we can certainly verify that inaccuracy with some external review.
What do you make of the timing of this announcement, given the fact that there is a huge event, a national event downtown?
Well, I can't predict when the Department of Justice is going to make the announcement or what's the purpose behind their timing. What I can tell you is that I never thought they would find a civil rights division if they examined the facts simply around the use of force at the time it was used. All right, I think the state laws and the federal laws are pretty clear on the standards that will be applied to finding an officer's behavior criminal in that context. The fact that there were policy violations was my call, and we took action on that. So I've been considering this for several weeks now, not knowing when the announcement would be, but pretty sure what it would be, and pretty sure that when that announcement would be, it would stir up a fair amount of consternation in some precincts. And my feeling was I should time this announcement. We're ready, willing, and able to do this. It was a coincidence that the accreditation was yesterday, but my feeling is we've been working hard to meet the standards that have already been set. And the community needs to know that, and that we're willing to do this in a transparent way, and both verify the positive changes we've made and be open to those changes that are recommended by external review.
But as far as the security of the city, given the fact that there could be some protesting going on, and there's another huge event that you have to also maintain.
This police department's, I think, demonstrated pretty consistently over the last year and a half that we're good at policing these events. We've policed literally dozens of ad hoc protests that took place without permits, that took to the streets without permission, and we've overwhelmingly done them without incident and without the need to make an arrest. We are well prepared tonight, both for the debate, for the protests that have already been announced, and for additional protests. And our goal is to give people an opportunity to peacefully assemble, to petition for the redress of their grievances, and to keep them out of harm's way from traffic or interference with their rights, while at the same time protecting the venue so that the folks there can exercise their First Amendment rights and participate in the political process.
Any concerns that the timing of the Fed's decision makes a complicated day potentially more dangerous for you and for the people who live here?
Well, it was already a complicated day. You know, we had the Republican National Convention debate, we've got the Celtics in town, and we've got a performance of Wicked going on, and we've got police issues to police in the neighborhoods. So we've been preparing this for some time, knowing all of those variables. This adds one more variable. But I'm convinced that we've got a strong plan. We've got a lot of practice dealing with it. It's a big-time police department and a big-time city, and I think we're up to the challenge.
And today is a day when many people who have been paying attention to the Dontre Hamilton case might not be pleased with the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. So they may not feel that that is an agency that is actually independent because of some measure they believe, from what I'm hearing, at least for their reaction this morning, was that they rubber-stamped this prior investigation by the DA. So, I mean, how do you get past that? I mean, they're not going to trust the notion that you've now turned to the feds, who they feel have failed in this situation, to oversee and to determine whether or not the Milwaukee Police Department is actually making progress.
I think we need to unbundle that a little bit. First of all, if you look at the Department of Justice as an entity, there's a civil rights division over here, there's a criminal division over here. Criminal division made a criminal finding. All right? The civil rights division, I think, has demonstrated over the last 7 years or 6 years that it is a very powerful advocate for fair and impartial policing, and has demonstrated time after time after time a willingness to sue police departments that they believe, based on statistical evaluations, not single critical incidents, are problematic. And city after city, whether it's Pittsburgh or Detroit or New Orleans or Los Angeles, that's come under consent decrees that have cost them millions of dollars and required reforms to processes that were clearly outside the state of police practice. So I don't think the Justice Department can be accused of rolling over for bad police practices. I think the challenge is the following. At the center of this, you have a grieving family that lost a loved one in a critical incident. Around it, you've got a lot of folks that will never be happy with anything this police department does or any police department does, and it's clear from their behavior and their rhetoric. There are opportunists that are taking this family's grief to make political points in a broader context. I can't convert them, and I'm not going to try. But for the rest of the community that may have any concerns about this, I think they recognize this is a Justice Department committed to police reform and will strong-arm it if they have to. And I think we'll be able to demonstrate, when being evaluated by the Justice Department, that on overwhelming balance, we've been moving in the right direction. I mean, you can have the best policies, the best procedures, and the best training in the world, and you can still have a critical incident that's mishandled. I mean, you can have doctors that go to the Harvard Medical School and cut off the wrong leg. Bad things will sometimes happen. That doesn't mean Harvard Medical School is a terrible medical school. It doesn't mean we are not moving in the right direction for the overwhelming majority of our officers with the policies we've put in place and the trainings we're sponsoring.
Chief, just to be clear then, so the COPS office still has to accept your request, correct?
That's correct, and they will check with the Civil Rights Division. The Civil Rights Division is, bringing up the heavy cannons, then we're out of luck. But if the fact is that, we're not under consideration for a pattern and practice lawsuit, and the fact that we can clearly demonstrate, just objectively, the progress we've made so far, that means we're a willing partner in reform efforts. Those are the two standards that have to be met in order to get a collaborative reform agreement. And unless I hear otherwise, I'm optimistic that we'll get one.
Chief, you've been working pretty closely with the Hamilton family to kind of keep this all copacetic, and as difficult situations go nationwide, this one has been very peaceful, largely credited to that cooperation. Have you been in touch with them this morning? Has there been any conversation about trying to keep everything under control when you have this huge national presence today?
Right now, I'm going to give them space to process their anger and disappointment. Their attorneys certainly know what the interests of the family are. We have spoken to their attorneys in the past. I'm convinced their attorneys are going to be giving them good advice. I don't doubt for a moment that they are going to express their disappointment and anger in appropriate ways, whether they're at press events or taking to the streets. But it's my commitment that if they so do, we'll make sure they do it safely. And we're convinced that we'll be able to create a safe environment for their exercise of their rights and still keep the city moving along.
When might you know if you're subject to a pattern and practice lawsuit?
Well, I'm not going to get a notification if they're not, okay, because that's like proving a negative. I would get a notification if they were. What I will say is that if the Justice Department says, we'd be happy to do collaborative reform with, I'm going to take that as a, clear indication that they're not looking to sue us and that they have not found that our critical incidents represent a pattern of misbehavior sanctioned by management and the result of our dereliction.
Thank you, guys.
Milwaukee Police Chief Ed Flynn wrapping up a news conference now addressing the federal government's decision not to charge former police officer Christopher Manny in connection with the death of Dontre Hamilton.
Yeah, that means there will be no criminal charges against him for that death, but he was fired from the police department for his actions that day.
All right, long day ahead. We got a lot more to get to. We'll be right back.